You sit there and you be quiet. Hello and welcome, everyone. We are live tonight. Fanbase, Facebook, YouTube, and maybe Twitter. Allegedly, they're having some trouble, some technical difficulties. Allegedly. I don't know. But tonight's lecture is not very long. It is called By Imagination We Become. Because Lord knows after today, I need a reminder. By imagination, we become. And this is July 1951. Hey, Cyber. How many times have we heard someone say, oh, it's only his imagination? Only his imagination. Man's imagination is the man himself. No man has too little imagination, but few men have disciplined their imagination. Imagination is itself indestructible. Therein lies the horror of its misuse. Daily we pass some stranger on the street and observe him muttering to himself, carrying on an imaginary conversation, an argument with no one present. He is arguing with vehemence, with fear, or with hatred, not realizing that he is setting in motion by his imagination an unpleasant event which he will presently encounter. Stay. There we go. The world as imagination sees it is the real world, not facts, but figments of the imagination shape our daily lives. It is the exact and literal minded who live in a fictitious world. It is the exact and literal minded who live in a fictitious world. Only imagination can restore the Eden from which experience has driven us out. Imagination is the sense by which we perceived the above, the power by which we resolve vision into being. Every stage of man's progress is made by the exercise of the imagination. It is only because men do not perfectly imagine and believe that their results are sometimes uncertain when they might always be perfectly certain. Let me say that to you again. It is only because men do not perfectly imagine and believe that their results are sometimes uncertain. But when they can always be certain, our imagination can always be certain. Determined imagination is the beginning of all successful operation. The imagination alone is the means of fulfilling the intention. The man who at will can call up whatever image he pleases is by virtue of the power of his imagination, least of all subject to caprice. Let's look it up because we're there. Caprice, a sudden and unaccountable change of mood or behavior. So the man who is disciplined is least likely to fall prey to his moods because he's in control of them. So read the sentence again and now you'll understand it. The man who at will can call up whatever image he pleases by virtue of the power of his imagination is least of all subject to the swaying of his moods, to caprice. The solitary or captive can, by intensity of imagination and feeling, affect myriads so that he can act through many men and speak through many voices. We should never be certain, wrote William Butler Yeats. that it was not some woman treading in the winepress who began that subtle change in men's minds, or that the passion did not begin in the mind of some shepherd boy, lighting up his eyes for a moment before it ran upon its way. Let me tell you the story of a very dear friend of mine, at the time the costume designer of the music hall in New York City. She told me one day of her difficulty in working with one of the producers who invariably criticized and rejected her best work unjustly, that he was often rude and seemed deliberately unfair to her. Upon hearing her story, I reminded her, as I am reminding you, that men can only echo to us that which we whisper to them in secret. I had no doubt, but that she silently argued with the producer, not in the flesh, but in quiet moments to herself. She confessed that she did just that each morning as she walked to work. I asked her to change her attitude toward him, to assume that he was congratulating her on her fine designs, and she in turn was thanking him for his praise and kindness. This young designer took my advice, and as she walked to the theater, she imagined the perfect relationship of the producer praising her work, and she in turn responding with gratitude for his appreciation. This she did morning after morning, and in a very short while, she discovered for herself that her own attitude determined the scenery of her existence. The behavior of the producer completely reversed itself. He became the most unpleasant professional. He became the most pleasant professional employer she had encountered. His behavior merely echoed the changes that she had whispered within herself. What she did was by the power of imagination. Her fantasy led his, and she herself dictated to him the discourse they eventually had together at the time she was seemingly walking alone. Let us set ourselves here and now a daily exercise of controlling and disciplining our imagination. What finer beginning than to imagine better than the best we know for a friend? There is no coal of character so dead that it will not glow and flame if but slightly turned. Don't blame, only resolve. Life, like music, can by a new setting turn all its discords into harmonies. Represent your friend to yourself as already expressing that which he desires to be. Let us know that with whatever attitude we approach another, a similar attitude approaches us. Well, how can we do this? Do what my friend did. To establish rapport, call your friend mentally. Focus your attention on him and mentally call his name just as you would to attract his attention were you to see him on the street. Imagine that he has answered. Mentally hear his voice. Imagine that he is telling you of the great good you have desired for him. You, in turn, tell him of your joy in witnessing his good fortune. Having mentally heard that which you wanted to hear, having thrilled to the news heard, go about your daily task. Your imagined conversation must awaken what it affirmed. The acceptance of the end wills the means. And the wisest reflection could not devise more effective means than those which are willed by the acceptance of the end. Listen. And the wisest reflection could not devise more effective means than those which are willed by the acceptance of the end. However, Your conversation with your friend must be in a manner which does not express the slightest doubt as to the truth of what you imagine that you hear and say. If you do not control your imagination, you will find that you are hearing and saying all that you formerly heard and said. We are creatures of habit, and habit, though not law, acts like the most compelling law in the world. With this knowledge of the power of imagination, be as the disciplined man and transform your world by imagining and feeling only what is lovely and of good report. The beautiful idea you awaken in yourself shall not fail to arouse its affinity in others. Do not wait 4 months for the harvest. Today is the day to practice the control and discipline of your imagination. Man is only limited by weakness of attention and poverty of imagination. Again, man is only limited by weakness of attention and poverty of imagination. The great secret is a controlled imagination and a well sustained attention, firmly and repeatedly focused on the object to be accomplished. Now is the acceptable time to give beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. Now is the time to control our imagination and attention. Now, by control, I do not mean restraint by willpower, but rather cultivating through love and compassion. With so much of the world in discord, we cannot possibly emphasize too strongly the power of imaginative love. As the world is, so is the individual. And it should be changed to, as the individual is, so is the world. Do you hear the difference? Listen to it. As the individual, let me say it again. As the world is, so is the individual. Should be changed to, as the individual is, so is the world. And I hope to be able to bring to each of you present the true meaning of the words of Zechariah. Speak ye every man the truth to his neighbor, and let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor. Oh, what a wonderful challenge to you and to me. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. As a man imagines, so is he. Hold fast to love in your imagination. By creating an ideal within your mental sphere, you can approximate yourself to this ideal image till you become one and the same with it, thereby transforming yourself into it, or rather, absorbing its qualities into the very core of your being. Never, never lose sight of the power that is within you. Again, never, never lose sight of the power that is within you. Imaginative love lifts the invisible into sight and gives us water in the desert. It builds for the soul its only fit abiding place. Beauty, love, and all of good report are the garden, but imaginative love is the way into the garden. Sow an imaginary conversation, you reap an act. Sow an act, you reap a habit. Sow a habit, you reap a character. Sow a character, you reap a destiny. By imagination, we are all reaping our destinies, whether they be good, bad, or indifferent. Imagination has full power of objective realization, and every stage of man's progress or regression is made by the exercise of imagination. You see, I believe with William Blake this statement: what seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be, and is productive of the most dreadful consequences to those to whom it seems to be, even of torments, despair, and eternal death. By imagination and desire, we become what we desire to be. Let us affirm to ourselves that we are what we imagine. If we persist in the assumption that we are what we wish to be, we will be transformed into that which we have imagined ourselves to be. We were born by a natural miracle of love, and for a brief space of time, our needs were all another's care. In that simple truth lies the secret of life. Except by love, we cannot truly live at all. Our parents, in their separate individualities, have no power to transmit life. So back we come to the basic truth that life is the offspring of love. Therefore, no love, no life. Thus, it is rational to say that God is love. Love is our birthright. Love is the fundamental necessity of our life. Do not go seeking for that which you are. Do not go seeking for that which you are. Those who go seeking for love only make manifest their own lovelessness, and the loveless never find love. Only the loving find love, and they never have to seek for it. Well, tonight, my beautiful friends, that is a most powerful lecture. Let me go back to the woman. Listen, we have things in our lives, and sometimes the things that we have in our lives can slap us in the face because they're so intense. But in that intensity, what I am learning, let me tell you, when your feet are to the fire, you've got two choices. You're going to do a hard 180 and look within yourself and draw your power from within, or you will have a meltdown. So you see the woman, he said, she was making all the costumes. He said to her, this is what I want you to do. When you're walking to work, I want you to change your conversation. Have a different kind of conversation with your boss. Now, he said it took her morning after morning after morning. It took her some time to do it. So I can't sit here and say she didn't fall backwards into the old state. But I'm going to tell you this. When you are faced with a situation, listen, I am, I'm telling it to you raw right now. When you are faced with a situation that seems dire and hopeless, hello, do a 180. Stop everything you're doing and breathe. Why? Because if you forget to breathe, you're going to freak out. But if you take a moment to deliberately stop yourself from freaking out and say, whoa, wait a minute. What does the law say? The law says to experience in imagination what I would experience in reality if I were the man or the woman I wanted to be. So what is it that I say that I want? And you tell yourself what it is, and you begin to hear, because you want the confirmation of your friends. What would they naturally say to you? You know what kind of friends you have. So that's why Neville told her, what kind of conversation would you be having here? And instead of always hearing him judging you, hear him compliment you. And she took him at his word. She took him at his word. And every moment, she turned herself into the direction of, you really like it? Why, thanks. Thank you. I put a lot of thought into that. Thank you. That's where she put herself over and over and over again. And I have found that even with myself, I'm going to tell you this before we go into the silence. I have found that even within myself, when situations remind you that you have no one in the world, you don't have anybody you can pick up the phone and call. When your life situations show you that, it is a good thing. Let me tell you why it is a good thing. Because the only thing that you have is the law itself. There is nothing that anybody can do for you. Hello, I am giving it to you raw. There's nothing that anybody can do for you until you first get into your imagination and play that bad boy out. But you don't play out the how of it, you play out the acceptance that it is done. Remember, Neville says there's two ways. If you can't see it and create a short scene, Neville says, what would it feel like if you were secure? What would it feel like if you were the person you wanted to be? You know what that feels like. So he said, bring up that feeling. And when you bring up that feeling, put yourself into a very still position. Lay back, lean back, recline, whatever. Sit down, but just get real still and feel it. Feel the acknowledgement and the acceptance. And I'll tell you what, we already know how to feel. Because if I tell you to think about somebody you don't like, well, you know how you feel, don't you? If I tell you to think about somebody that you do like, you know how you feel, don't you? So it is natural then for you and I to sit there and say, what would it feel like right now if I got my new job? What would that feel like to me? What would it feel like if somebody called me and said, dude, I heard you got that job? What would that feel like to you? Then bring it up. Bring it up like heartburn. Bring it up. Bring up that feeling, that sensation. And when you get nice and still, hold that in your mind's eye. That sensation that is coursing through you, hold it there because that's how you would feel. And when you hold it there, you are telling yourself by experiencing it, you are telling yourself, it is done. That's what you're telling yourself by feeling it. So if you're telling yourself it is done, well, then if it is done, what do you do when something is done? Thank you. That's what you say. Thank you. And you say thank you. And every time you say thank you, you feel it. The more you say thank you, the more you feel it. The more you say thank you, the more you feel it. And you build that intensity and you build that intensity and you build that intensity of thank you and the feeling over and over again until what Neville says, you reach a climax. And when you get up from there, your world is going to tell you, you crazy. Ain't nothing changed. That's what because your eyes are wide open now. Can't you see? And that's what your world will tell you. Well, nothing has changed. But you have to hold fast to the knowledge that I saw it, I felt it, and I accepted it. So it is. That's what we're going for in 5 minutes of silence. So what do you want? Either see it and hear it in your mind's eye, experience in imagination what you would experience in reality if you were the man or the woman you wanted to be, or what would it be like if you had it right here, right now? What would that feeling be? Oh, you see that thrill? Let us go into 5 minutes and see how much you can make it. Let's see how intense you can make it. Because remember, the pendulum swings and rhythm compensates. So, however intense you make it here in your imagination is how fast it shows up in the outside world. Test it now. Let us begin. And there you have it, everyone. Our 5 minutes of silence. So tonight, as we go to bed, remember what to do. Remember, you know what you want. You know what it feels like to you to have it. The key is to accept it. Accept it. This is not something far-fetched. Believe me, I'm learning it right now. It's not something far-fetched. There's no dancing naked in the moonlight to get it. You just have to know that. How many times have you done this in the past? How many times have you said, even before you knew the law, you said you needed something and just bam, it showed up? Then apply the same principle. You understand? So what you want, accept it. And because you have accepted it, the way for it to come to you has been predetermined because of your acceptance. So when you get the feeling, you're not just feeling it for the sake of feeling it, you're feeling it as confirmation that you have accepted it. So you keep feeling and reaching for the feeling. And when the feeling sits true for you, that means you have accepted it. I trust that this makes more sense to you tonight. Do not try and justify anything, whether you're worthy. That is not the exercise. Accept what it is you have done. Countdown initiated. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Much love to you, Shea Butter, Wisdom Almighty, Cyber, Nadia, Miss Cherry, Flo, Smiles, Fawn, and that deal. And for the others who have not made themselves known in the chat, I see you. Rest well, my beautiful friends, and know within yourself that it is done. I love you.